So often we take a audit of how do we feel? How do we feel? How do we feel? How do we feel? I want to feel good. I don't feel good. Something's wrong. Maybe not feeling good is exactly right. We back, baby, with another reflection on the Daily Vedantic. Today's reflection. Today I was thinking about how our 4-year-old Marley, she so adorable. And she has this habit of licking her bottom lip, right below the lip, where it gets really red and chapped and chafed. Dry skin is below the actual lip, and she just keeps licking it. It made me think about this story that I reflect on every once in a while. This was maybe 12 years ago, where I was at heart doctor. I have a heart condition, and after we discovered it, a irregular heartbeat. After it was discovered, I had to go to the ER, and they shocked my heart back into rhythm, and with those paddles from the TV shows and movies, and it was a bit of a scary time. And a few months later, maybe 3 months later, I scheduled an appointment with the doctor because I felt like it had come back, that this irregular heartbeat had started back. And go see the doctor. They run a handful of tests over 10, 15 minutes. And this is a very deadpan, not a very animated individual, my doctor in San Francisco. And he went through the test results with me, and he said, everything looks good. You're all good. You're fine. And I said, but doc, it feels off. And he looked at me and he said, it might feel that way, but it's not that way. And I was about as stunned and as silent as I am even just retelling the story. The logic is so sound, so contrary to the viewpoint I had of if it felt a certain way, it's got to be a certain way. I think about that every once in a while because what we feel many times has nothing to do with how something is. For Marley, it might feel good to her to lick the bottom of her lip over and over again throughout the day. And yet it's making things worse and worse and worse. How it feels and how it is are often in our lives at odds. And yet so often we take a audit of how do we feel? How do we feel? How do we feel? How do we feel? I want to feel good. I don't feel good. Something's wrong. Maybe not feeling good is exactly right. Maybe not feeling good about doing the wrong thing. Maybe not feeling good about knowing you're abdicating your duty or responsibility in some area of life is exactly what we should feel. I remember feeling some anxiety in high school about tests, and I would leave things at the last minute and feel some anxiety about grades, getting into college. Then in college, I'd feel some anxiety about papers and quizzes and tests and grades and getting a job. And in high school and in college, I'd have friends that would peace out and escape from that discomfort with smoking weed, drinking entirely too much. And I would look at them and think to myself, no, there's an amount of discomfort we should feel. And we probably do more harm to ourselves by getting rid of it, escaping it, than we do by feeling it for a few extra hours during the course of a day. Marley licking her chapped lower lip and it getting worse. She doesn't understand when I try to tell her, no, that makes it worse. Because, and I've told her that countless times, because she's judging on her subjective experience. No, it actually makes it feel better. But wise decisions so often are lining up the short, medium, and long term. Optimizing the short, the medium, and the long term. And if you're going to do one at the sake of the other, it's usually deprioritizing the short term for the long term. But operating on how we feel is usually the opposite. Prioritizing the short term, how we feel in a moment, versus how we're going to feel long term, how we're going to be long term. Making a decision, making a bunch of decisions, making nearly all of our life's decisions based on how will that make me feel, one by one, moment to moment. I want to do the decision. I want to make the decision that's going to make me feel the best. Is one of the quickest ways to ruin our lives. Take the extreme of pursuing a life filled with drug use, completely consumed by making the next moment feel as good as possible, destroying and burning up the medium, the long term. I've talked about this 20th century philosopher, social psychologist Eric Fromm, that had this breakdown when you're thinking and you're at a fork in the road. And we usually think between option A and option B, it's, what am I going to get? And if you take this towards this direction of feeling, what feeling am I going to get between option A and option B? And he reorients any fork in the road. Any fork in the road. Could be, you might be sitting there ordering ice cream, and yet you can still reorient the question from not what am I going to get, but what am I going to become? If I do get the 2-3 scoop option, when I know, it's probably going to mess with my sleep. It's probably not going to be the best option for me, for how I'm going to feel 30 minutes after eating it. Or maybe you're one of the ones that can eat 3 scoops, totally fine. But in my case, I know if I have 2 or 3 scoops, it takes a toll on my sleep. That amount of sugar before going to bed. 1 scoop, totally fine. Middle path, not one extreme or over the other. I just want to put that disclaimer out there that there's nothing wrong with eating ice cream. But the decision is not what am I going to get? It is what am I going to become? And that switch, maybe not when we're 4 years old, but when we're 24, when we're 18, when we're 54. That switch can be so powerful to take us from an accumulation of feels, accounting and auditing. How do we feel? How are we going to feel? And taking us towards who are we going to be? And when we bring that framework into our daily lives, there's a switch from thinking about, constantly think about, how do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? And it gets us to start thinking about, what should I do? What is the right thing to do in this moment? And what ties these two together, and it's so beautiful, and I've never heard this in any other philosophy, is the principle within Vedantic of nothing feels as good as doing what you ought to do. There might be some sacrifice in the short term, but nothing feels as good as doing what you ought to do. Meaning, even if you do care about optimizing how you feel, do what you ought to do. When I knock off 2 or 3 hour obligations that so much of me wants to put off in my daily life, I feel, it is better than a 2-hour nap. I feel ecstatic, so liberated from doing the thing that I knew I needed to do. That is a beautiful aspect of this philosophy that I want to underscore again. It is not saying make the hard choice because the hard things are the right things. The right things will benefit your community, or being unselfish is the right thing to do because of some cosmic judge. I'm actually saying you yourself will benefit the most by doing what you ought to do in the very way that we think we're orienting our lives, how you feel. You will feel the most joy, the most energy, the most bliss. By actually heeding the call for what you know deep down you ought to do. That is the definition of right action within this philosophy, that which generates energy. The definition of wrong action is that which dissipates energy. Party for 5-6 hours with friends and suffer for 12 the next day, that is a dissipation of energy. Do something that feels good for 30 minutes and you regret for weeks, months. Definition of a dissipation of energy. Do something that is really hard, and I think most of the hard things we do, it's really just a decision of 12 seconds. A 1-hour gym session starts with just 12 seconds of, nope, I'm doing this. Going to grab my shoes. 12 seconds of, all right, I've got this window, this moment of time. I should say this hard but right thing to this person I supposedly care for. 12 seconds of someone needs your help, and you could easily justify not helping them with 13, 14, 15, 20 seconds. But for 12 seconds, you know, this is one of those times I actually really need to help this person. And you surrender into that. This 12-second concept comes from, I was doing laundry when I was building my last company, and I was doing laundry and just walking through this room that we shared, this common room, and our hacker house where we were just building software in. Straight from the movie or straight from the TV show Silicon Valley on HBO. And it was at night, and I was doing laundry, just walking by, and I don't know what movie it was. I have no idea what the context was, but this female character says to this male character, lives are made on the other side of 12 seconds of courage. Lives are made on the other side of 12 seconds of courage. Still have no idea what movie that was or what the context was, because I just kept walking through the room. But man, that has stuck with me that was 13 years ago. Because I was like, holy hell, lives are made on the other side. It's about 12 seconds of courage to make the decision that you're going to do the right thing. That you're going to do the hard, the easy. It's just the right thing. It is often harder than the easy thing. And some of the most difficult decisions I've ever made, I actually think about this when I go into a hard conversation, that just prepare for about 12 seconds of awkwardness, of silence. And then it's over. And then I'm so glad I went into it. That person, I remember telling a friend that he shouldn't marry his girlfriend at the time that he'd been dating for 5 years. And I was like, I really don't think y'all are a match. And there was about 4 or 5 of us friends that all thought it. And I remember thinking that with another friend, that then 4 years into their marriage, they got a divorce, and thinking, holy hell, I should have said that. What I was thinking. And I was not going to make that same mistake twice. And it was about 12 seconds of awkwardness, silence, maybe of disbelief that I was saying it, or maybe it was him being stunned by, there was already some volume in his head that got turned up that it wasn't the right fit. They would end up breaking up, and 2 years later, he was getting engaged to the love of his life that he's now married to and has a kid with. I was prepared for him to just never even talk to me again. And it ended up being only about 12 seconds of awkwardness, of discomfort, before he started to absorb it. It was a few months of tenuous relationship between myself and him, and between him and his girlfriend, as he kind of came to grips with that decision. But months later, he ended up calling me, acknowledging that that conversation was what tripped the wire into him leaning into what he already knew deep down. Sometimes the lives that are made on the other side of those 12 seconds, it's not your life, it's someone else's life that you're making. But this all comes back to how something feels and how something is might be completely different. Something might feel awful, but that doesn't mean it is awful. Like my doctor talking to me with his deadpan, expressionless voice. It might feel that way, but it doesn't mean it is that way. How something feels might be completely unrelated to how something is. If something feels good, it actually might be, as we touched on last episode, what's like nectar in the beginning might be poison in the end. And what is like poison in the beginning might very well be nectar in the end. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.